Welcome to the Developer Odyssey series, episode number 12. The title of this one is Backend Blast. Hey, if this is the first video that you've seen in this series, check out the playlist below, and that'll take you to the very first video, and you can watch all the way through to this one, just so you can kind of keep up with where we're at, or certainly feel free to click on any of the videos in the playlist, or any of the videos on the Dev Mentor Dave YouTube channel, whatever is interesting to you. Again, if you're not familiar with front end versus back end, today we're talking about the back end, but check out episode 7 of this series to get a high level overview of what we mean by front end versus back end, or client versus server side. Today we're going to be looking at the back end. We're going to be looking at the server side of websites and web applications. So not long after I was really starting to get into web development and starting to kind of get my feet wet and building websites, I realized that I wanted to be able to do something a little bit more than just build a web page and display some information. I wanted to be able to save information. I wanted to be able to give people the opportunity to save information and pull that information back. And I'd heard about these things called databases and servers and things like that, but I'd never really messed with it. And so that's when my journey into the backend world of development began. And I was pleasantly surprised to find that there's a lot going on the server side. There's a lot going on the back end of web development that is sometimes a little bit even easier than the front end, depending on the type of personality that you have and the things that you enjoy working on. So what exactly do we mean when we say the back end or the server when it comes to websites or web applications? Well, again, we use that word server because every website, every web application is hosted on some type of server, which is basically just another computer that has special software to be able to take in requests and process those requests and send back results to the client or to the front end. And so the back end is basically just another computer with special software that does the processing that's being requested. Now, the different types of software are going to be different depending on the type of back end that you're wanting to build. For example, you may have database software. You've got some sort of programming language often that you're going to interact with, like PHP or Node, which is JavaScript, or Python or Java or Go or C# or Rust, or lots of different languages, as you can tell. And you don't have to know all of those. The nice thing about backend is you don't have to know all the different types of programming languages. You generally just need at least one backend programming language like PHP, and then usually probably one database language such as MySQL or SQL or something like that. So you don't have to know all these different things that I just stated, but you do have to know a programming language. You generally do have to know some sort of database language. So there's a couple of languages there that you're going to need to learn and interact with. But again, there's a whole long list of potential languages that you could learn that I just listed off. And all of those are possibilities, and they all are used by different companies for different reasons and different purposes. And we're not going to go into each of those here today. We just want to get an idea of how that all actually works. So again, this is processes running on the server. They're going to get a request, and then the code that you write in that language is going to accept that request and then do something with it. So it's going to save information in a database, or it's going to pull information out of a database and send that information back. But it's basically it's going to accept requests and send back responses. Another thing that it may do is run automated process. So you might have a certain job that you want to run on the database to maybe clean up some old data or something like that, and you want it to run every day at midnight, for example. Well, you can have a program that tells your application to run this specific process at a specific time. And you might have to learn things like Linux or Unix or some other languages to help you interact with some of those things. So you're not getting off the hook completely on learning lots of different languages. But the nice thing is, once you pick one, they don't really change quite as much as a lot of the front end stuff changes. So what are some of the pros of working on the back end? Well, the first one to me is that you don't have to deal as much with cosmetic things. It's more of a logical process. So you're writing more logical things. You're not building things for for people to see and interact with. You're just basically manipulating data. You're taking data in, you're manipulating it, you're storing it, you're pulling data out, you're manipulating it, you're returning it. So it's a lot of interacting with data and not necessarily building something for people to interact with on their computers, because it's all just going to run on the server. So to me, that's a huge pro, because you don't have to worry about other people's opinions as much as you do just making sure that it actually accomplishes what they're wanting it to accomplish. Another pro for backend developers is oftentimes they get paid better than front-end developers. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, there's fewer of us because most boot camps and things like that are focusing more on the front end design elements than they are on the back end data manipulation and storage side. And so there's fewer people that are applying for those jobs, and there's fewer people who are getting those jobs. So that tends to give us a little bit better pay range. If you're going specifically for a back end role, or often a full stack role is going to get better compensation than just a front end dev role. Now, the reason for that better compensation is because of one of the main cons of working on the back end, and that it's just much more complex. It's much more logical. You have to think through things more. You have to work with data manipulation, and that's not always easy depending on the complexity of the data itself. You have to deal with potentially multiple other entities and connecting to them and interacting with them and manipulating their data. So there's definitely a lot more logic, a lot more programming, a lot more thought that goes into this without a lot of like the visual feedback that you get with front-end development. Another con is that typically if there's a problem with the website or the web application and it's not something that's just a visual issue, that's going to fall on you to figure out what the issue is. We do a lot of debugging on the back end, whereas on the front end, you do some debugging, but it's more visual issues. It's not as much like the data manipulation, security issues, things like that that can really bring down a website or a web application. That's one of the reasons why the pay scale is better, but it's also definitely more complex, can be definitely more stressful or more nerve-wracking to deal with some of those issues, especially when you're first starting out. Well, hopefully I didn't scare you away from the back end, because in my opinion, the back end is actually the best place to work. If I had to choose between the front end and the back end, personally, I would choose the back end. But that's also because I'm not really much of a design person. You don't want me picking the colors for your room. Hey, if you're finding this information helpful, I'd appreciate it if you click the like button. Just lets YouTube know that people are finding this information helpful and helps it push it out to other people who might like it as well. If you're not subscribed, click the subscribe button, click the bell icon to be notified the next time we upload a video in this series or just any other video on the channel. Thanks for spending time with me today, and I'll see you on the next one.